Hi, Bob. Thank you. And Bob was one of the people who encouraged this early on, this line of conducting trials. I've been working on home-based clinical trials now for about 20 years. I'll give you a couple of examples, but it's focused on application to older adults. So now, if I can, home-based trials are also called virtual trials. They have no clinical sites. No geographic limits, therefore, on participation, because a center reaches out to participants in homes anywhere they happen to live. Here are the essential elements, of course: web-based data collection, and then electronic consent done over the web. And then examinations in homes, expanding what we're capable of doing to include mobile devices and exams made by in-home nurses. For a long time in our studies of older people, we've been able to make geriatric assessments in home. There's a wide variety of those. But some examinations can be done, that are usually done in clinical sites, can be done by research nurses who, in their services, cover about 90% of the US population. Laboratory can be done in home. We collect blood specimens at home. We also, as you'll see, do point of care testing for some screening in home. And treatments can also be done at home. In our studies, we've sent oral agents to home by overnight mail, and recently engaged research nurses to give parenteral drugs at home. Safety monitoring is often a question, and we use pretty much a similar approach as we have in other trials, where patients report their AEs to a central site overseen by a doctor who can be on call 24/7 if needs be. There's some advantages and some disadvantages for older people. Well, the advantages, has been pointed out, is that you can reduce barriers and burdens, eliminating the travel to sites, eliminating parking issues, diminishing hassles. The trials take less time. And not only that, you don't have to follow the appointment schedule at the site. You can do these trials often at your greater convenience. These trials, being essentially real world trials, have greater generalizability, presumably. Now, the question was raised as an example, could they be used for vaccine trials? I actually think, it was suggested earlier, that it has the advantage of taking such trials to older people and getting enough older people in them to test the efficacy and safety in that population. For example, does a vaccine reduce hospitalization or death, is something that would require a much larger population of older individuals. But there are disadvantages. It's said that more than half, as of a couple of years ago, more than half of people over the age of 70 had internet access, but that's been increasing because of the pandemic and patient care delivered from home over Zoom. Some older patients prefer face-to-face interactions, and these are less home-based, web-based trials are less attractive. Some need assistance with web-based processes, and a few, but surprisingly few in our experience, don't want home visits, for example, by research nurses. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One is remote. It's a trial of detrol in women with overactive bladder, and one that is just underway called TOPAZ in patients with Parkinson's disease. Remote is well known in the circles of people interested in these types of trials. It's a comparison of detrol versus placebo for overactive bladder in women with a mean age of about 50. It was done under an IND approved by FDA with Bob's help. The goal of that trial, however, was to mimic a clinical site-based trial with all its complexities. So the protocol was quite complex. It involved many steps, including over 100 screens that people had to view in order to get from the first step through the end of treatment. And we had, from our clinic, our coordinating center, an average of over 90 interactions with participants who enrolled, because they were trying to translate a standard protocol, not take advantage of the simplicity you could have from home. Consequently, 40 to 80% of participants dropped out at each one of the various steps that are involved in this trial. And at the end, only about 1% of the women who were eligible and interested at the study in the beginning made it through everything in order to be randomized. So we learned from that trial that FDA is very supportive. The electronic methods and the way to do this at home works well, but complex steps, when given, when you try to do them remotely, seem to lose potential participants. So I'm going to talk about TOPAZ, which is a trial of Parkinson's disease. We're doing this because patients with Parkinson's have high risk of fracture. We don't know whether the drugs that are approved for fracture work in these patients who have so many falls. So we're testing an FDA-approved intravenous drug called zoledronate that's known to increase bone strength. A single infusion lasts more than 2 years. And the question is, will this work in these patients? This is a trial funded by NIA. It's been getting underway the last several months. Our goal is 3,500 participants over the age of 65. It includes patients with disabilities and explicitly patients with dementia who need a legally authorized representative to provide consent. It's being done nationwide. There are no clinic visits. It's conducted entirely from patients' homes, and it's very simple. Let me show you. The recruitment is done by neurologists in practice or through EMR searches or through social media. And the potential participants are referred to a website where e-consent, electronic consent, is done. They fill out a short questionnaire. And if they are eligible by those terms, we arrange a telemedicine visit done by a neurologist that confirms the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, collects just a little bit of additional information, and a nurse then goes to the patient's home, where a point-of-care fingerstick blood test is done to make sure that they have a GFR that's acceptable. A mouth exam is done to make sure they have no lesions that would be contraindicated. Then they're given intravenously, either zoledronate or placebo. If, in fact, the original referring doctor is a neurologist, we can skip telemedicine, and they go straight from the website to a nurse visit. And the outcomes are assessed by follow-up calls with the participants, with a validation of fractures in their EMRs. And AEs, as I said earlier, are reported to a phone line with central physician oversight. There's another trial that's been underway, a larger trial called Adaptable, which I think is also a nice model of this approach. 15,000 patients with cardiovascular disease identified in EHRs go to a website where they get information, consent, randomized, aspirin sent to home, and their outcomes are followed up in EHRs and claims data. The issues we encounter is, first, of course, most trials, the vast majority of them must be done in clinical sites because they need, for example, MRIs or specialized exams. But even those trials can use many of the elements I've described here. When they use some of the elements like home delivery of drugs or in-home exams, referred to as hybrid trials. We've learned that relationships are very important. They may be, patients I think are more likely to participate if they hear from their physician that they should, and the physician refers them to the study website. Having one-on-one phone and Zoom calls at the beginning to welcome them and during the trials is important to both encouraging them to participate and to stay in. And the visits to home by nurses, we believe, adds an element of that kind of relationship. Now, sites are expensive, and so home-based trials may cost less. In fact, our budget for the TOPAZ trial, all of the costs of the trial put together, is $10,000 per patient. So let me summarize by saying that home-based drug trials are feasible, and I think they may be particularly valuable for older adults. The FDA has been supportive of doing them in this fashion. And I think they're going to be more successful for older participants if they are simple. Thank you.